Okay, welcome to the Objective 4 podcast on Westward expansion. I can explain the different reasons why Americans rushed west once the Mexican American War had ended. Now, there were a lot of different reasons why Americans wanted to move west, some of which we've already talked about, and some of which we're going to be talking about for the first time today. The first one of these reasons is manifest destiny. Remember, that's the belief that a lot of United States citizens held, that it was their destiny, they were put here by God to control the United States, the North American continent, from ocean to ocean. They believed that their culture, their religions, their way of government, and their way of life was superior in every way to the people who were already there, and they felt like it was their God-given right to take over this territory and spread their religions and their culture across the continent. The next reason that we've already talked about is that there was a lot of cheap, or in some cases even free, land out to the west. This was because the United States government felt like the land was free. There was nobody on it, even though in a lot of cases there were Mexicans and then later Mexican Americans or Native Americans on this land. The United States government was doing a lot of things, giving a lot of land grants to citizens, encouraging them to move out to the New Mexico territory, to California, or to Oregon country. The next reason why a lot of Americans moved west was for better farmland. Now, in some cases, this was true. There was better farmland available to the west, especially into Oregon country, or if you got all the way out into California. Most of the New Mexico territory, parts of Utah, Arizona, New Mexico, the farmland wasn't real great there. But in some cases, this was just rumor. Again, the United States government or the newspapers were spreading these rumors about wheat that would grow as tall as a man, trying to encourage people to move out that direction and begin their farming lives out there. Out in Oregon country, there was a lot of very successful fur trapping and trading, and that was another reason why a lot of Americans would move west. We already talked about the mountain men that would help the United States travelers kind of cross over the Rocky Mountain regions. These men would also have very successful hunting and trapping careers as beaver pelt and other furs became very desirable fashion in other parts of the world. And finally, the last of the reasons why Americans move west that we've already talked about is the Pacific Ocean ports, especially San Francisco and San Diego in California. This gave the United States traders access to the Pacific Ocean for the first time via ship, and really opened up trade routes with China and other Asian countries. But there were two other reasons why Americans moved west that we haven't talked about yet, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. Those two reasons are religious freedom, and how a lot of Americans were seeking religious freedom by moving west, and the California Gold Rush, and how that encouraged Americans to move to California. In 1844, a group of people known as the Mormons began moving west looking for a new home. They followed the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, founded by Joseph Smith, and eventually his successor, Brigham Young. The Mormons had several teachings that non-Mormon people didn't like, and encouraged them to kind of move west from where they had kind of started in Illinois and further east. They believed property should be held in common, and that a man could have more than one wife. To escape religious persecution, 15,000 Mormons moved out west into what is present-day Utah and began building a city that is now Salt Lake City, Utah. Utah is a harsh desert climate. There isn't a lot going on there, but they did find religious freedom that's very scarce on natural resources. However, the Mormons did find the freedom to practice the religion that they wanted, the way that they wanted, once they had arrived in Salt Lake City. Aside from religious freedom, the other reason why a lot of Americans began moving west was the discovery of gold. In 1848, gold was discovered at Sutter's Mill in California. This triggers an international fever known as gold fever, as people from China, Europe, Australia, and South America, along with thousands of Americans, begin moving towards California and other parts of western North America, Colorado, Utah, etc. These people became known as 49ers, named after the year that they moved there, 1849. It's also what the San Francisco football team is named after. This whole process becomes known as the California Gold Rush. Now, very few people discover gold or actually make a lot of money during the California Gold Rush. In fact, most of the people that made a lot of money were those who went out there and were selling things like breakfast foods or pickaxes and shovels to the miners who were there to dig for gold. The Gold Rush creates a very diverse culture in California. Much of California was of Mexican descent already. It was mixed heavily with Native Americans and American cultures. But there were thousands of Chinese that sail across the Pacific Ocean to join this, whose families later become Chinese Americans. So did many free African Americans who move out west and join that culture. As a result of this, California still to this day has one of the most diverse populations of any state in the United States. Because of its increase in population and its need for order, there was a lot of law breaking and civil unrest in California. California was admitted as a free state under the Compromise of 1850, which you'll learn more about next unit. That brings us to the end of our Objective 4 podcast. Please review the I can statement and ask yourself if you can complete it, if you can answer some of the different reasons why Americans rushed west once the Mexican-American War had ended, including some of the ones that we had already talked about and the two new ones that we talked about today, the religious freedom and the California Gold Rush. Also, review the vocabulary words on your unit sheet and make sure that while you're answering those questions, you can use the vocab words during your answers.